Track your focus sessions in Notion and gamify your daily productive time using this fun template, featuring an integrated stopwatch widget, simple button controls, a daily focus time chart, and a handy focus session log that tracks your daily focus time and reminds you to take sufficient breaks throughout your day. In this step-by-step tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build this little Notion app yourself. So join me and follow along, which is also what I've found to be the best way to actually learn and improve your own Notion skills. And if you don't want to build the template yourself, go and check the description below this video to get this template completely for free. My goal is to make these tutorials as accessible and as engaging as possible for everyone. So feel free to adjust the playback speed using the YouTube player settings to make the video faster or slower according to your own preference. And now let's get into it. Alright, welcome to my Notion workspace. And as you can see now, I have created a new page. We are starting completely from scratch. And I'm going to start off by naming this page as I want to name our template, the focus time tracker. And I'm going to add an icon for which I'm going to choose the hourglass icon. Then I go into the page, and because I like to organize my pages by putting in some section dividers, I am going to use a callout block by typing in /call, pressing enter. And as you can see, it is already pre-formatted as gray background, which I like to use for this use case. Now I'm going into the callout block. I'm typing 2 hashtags followed by a space to add a heading to block. And I'm just going to call this content as my headline, followed by another enter to start a new block. And now we are creating our database. For this, I'm just typing in /data, and then I click on database full page in the drop-down list. This will automatically open the new database that you can see is nested in the previous page that we have created. I'm going to give the database a title, calling it Focus Sessions Database. And I'm going to add another icon where I'm going to choose the hourglass again to stay consistent. What I'm doing here in the database, as you can see, it was created with a table view, which is exactly what I need because the table view is the best view to create all the data and properties because you have everything in one view and you can move things around and edit them very easily compared to other views. The only thing that I'm going to change here is I'm going to give it a different name. I like to call my setup view always all, knowing that all properties are going to be visible in this. And I like to give this one the database icon. Now that we have set this up, let's also create one sample data entry, which I can also immediately name as focus session, so that we know, okay, this is the first focus session that we're going to use to set up everything. And lastly, I'm going to change the name of this property. Instead of name, I'm just going to call it session, which is more fitting, but you can honestly also keep it the same. Now, in the next step, we are going to create all the properties that we need first, and then we're going to fill them with the content and formulas as needed. So for this template, I need first a date property. So I click on the plus, then I type date. And I choose type date from here. I'm going to choose the date format, which in my case, I prefer day, month, and year. And for the time format, I choose 24 hours, but you can obviously keep that as you prefer. And I'm also going to give this property a name by calling it start time. And I press enter to create it. And then I click into my database to close the drop-down menu. I'm going to right click on the property then to duplicate it by clicking on duplicate property, which makes sure that all the settings that I just made in terms of date format and time remain the same. And this one I'm going to call end time. So we have our 2 date properties already. And next I'm going to create 4 formula properties, which we are all going to use with different formulas to handle the data. So let me just go ahead first and create one formula property and adding it. And then I'm just going to duplicate this one 4 times or 3 times. Now we have formula 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to make all my properties a little bit smaller so we can all fit them right next to each other and work with them a little bit more easily. And then we're going to rename these formulas in a second. I rename the first one to start, which is just going to show us the start time and not the date, which we don't need if we already know it's for today. The next one I'm going to call end. The third formula property I'm going to call focus. And in brackets, I'm gonna write an H for hours to show and make clear that we are going to track our focus time in hours rather than in minutes or any other time unit. And the last one I'm going to call break. And here in brackets, I'm going to put an M for minutes because our break time we are going to calculate in minutes. Next, we're going to put in some sample data for the start and end time so that we can then build our formulas based on this data. I'm going to choose today's date, I include the time, and for the start time, I'm going to fill in 7 o'clock in the morning. That's when I started my focus session today. And as end time, I do the same. I choose today, and as time, I'm going to choose 4 in the afternoon. So let's say I had a very, very productive day, taking no breaks from 7 to 4 p.m. That sounds great to me, but it's just sample data, as you will see later. Then we are going to edit our start formula, which is where, as I said, I only want to see the hour of our start time. I don't want to see the date. So to do so, I click on this field, which will open the formula editor. Now I type format date, which you can already choose here from the suggestions. Then I choose the start time property, and then followed by a comma, I can now type in how I want to format this date. And in my case, I want to see the hours and the minutes, and you can see the result is only going to show us the hour time 7 instead of the whole date, as you can see in the start time. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to do the exact same to the end formula, where we again type in format date, followed by the end time this time, followed by a comma, and then HH colon MM in brackets. And we're gonna see the finish time of this session without the date as well. So now, how can we calculate the difference between end and start time in hours? I don't want to have any time. I just want to know how many hours has been spent between the start time and the finish time, which in this case, of course, is very easy to calculate in our head. It's 9 hours, but sometimes we will also start at 8:51 and we will end at 3:57 in the afternoon, so then the calculation isn't as easy. So to do so, we can use a more sophisticated formula, which I'm going to show you now. I'm going to click on the formula for the focus formula, and here I'm going to start by typing timestamp, followed by a bracket, followed by end time. And then this will, as you can see, give me a specific Unix timestamp of the date that is in the end time property. Every date in a programming language has a specific Unix timecode in milli or microseconds, which you can see right now. But this, of course, doesn't really help us a lot, but for the calculation, you will see how we can translate this into hours in a little bit. Now I'm gonna deduct another timestamp, this time from the start time, which will give us the difference between the start time and the end time, which is exactly what we're looking for. But now, as I said, we have it in milliseconds, which isn't really useful for our case. But I can just easily add brackets around this calculation and then divide this whole number by 3.6 million. So that's 3, 6, and 5 zeros. And now you can see we have already our desired result of 9 hours here. But as I said, what if the end time and the start time are not as simple as 7 o'clock and 4 o'clock? Let's take a look what happens. First, I save this formula, and now I'm going to change the time to, as I said, 7:51, and maybe the end time to 16 in the afternoon. Then you can see suddenly our focus time is shown in hours, but it comes with many numbers behind the decimal point, which doesn't look great, and we don't really need this kind of detail. So now let's fix this by opening the formula editor again, and then we first of all multiply this entire calculation by 100, which will return 841. Now I put brackets around the entire formula, and now we type round in the beginning, and lastly, in the end of this, we divide the formula by 100. And then we press save, which, as you can see now, rounds our result from this calculation between the difference between the end time and the start time to a decimal number with 2 numbers behind the decimal point. Lastly, we are going to edit our break formula, which is going to give us a recommended break time based on the length of our focus session. And here I'm going to open the formula editor, and I'm going to start with a similar calculation, again by using the timestamp of our end time, followed by a minus of the timestamp from our start time, which will again give us a result as before. But now I want to calculate this into minutes. So rather than dividing it by 3.6 million, we are this time going to divide it by 60,000, which is 60 times less than 3.6 million. So now we have the difference between these two times is 505 minutes. And now what I want lastly is to multiply this by 0.20, because this is going to represent 20% of our focus time. 20% is a good amount to put in as a recommended break based on my own research. So after every focus session, I am stepping away from my screen, trying to get in some movement and drink something for this amount of time. But you can also adjust this to your own liking and, for example, turn it into 10% or 30%. And the last thing that I'm going to do is add another pair of brackets around here. And then I'm going to type in seal at the beginning, which is the sealing formula, which always will round up the result of this. So if the result of this is maybe 5.5, it will round up to 6 minutes. If the result is 32.1, it will round up to 33 minutes. That's just what I've chosen to always get a round number of break minutes. And lastly, I'm going to save this again. So now our formulas are all set up and the basic setup of our database is ready. Let's do one more thing and check if everything is working out by changing the times once more to a more realistic scenario. So let's see, we keep our 7:51, but maybe we only worked in a normal scenario for about 1.5 hours, around until 9:20 in the morning. Then you can see our start time remains at 7:51. The end time has now changed to 9:20, which represents a total focus time of 1.48 hours. And now it is recommended to take an 18-minute break, which is exactly what I want these formulas to do. I'm now going to duplicate this session to have some extra sample data. And I'm going to change time to have some different values for an entire day. So now you can see we have 4 focus sessions for the day with different starting times, different end times, all calculated with their focus time and their respective break time. And now one thing I'm going to do to this view is I'm going to click on sort and I'm going to press start time. And I want to sort them by descending so that the newest focus session is always shown at the top. So the first session is at the bottom, the last session is at the top. I can click again to close this. And now we have set up our main database view. The next thing I'm going to do is duplicate this entire view and then use this to edit it further. I'm going to duplicate it, and now the drop-down menu opens where I can change the name to today. And I'm also going to change the icon to a calendar icon. And now one thing that we're going to do here is we're going to hide some properties, because this is the database view that we're going to put on our dashboard, and I don't want to see the actual full start time and end time there. All I want to see is the time, the end time without dates, the focus time, and the break time. And this is already everything we need to do in terms of properties, but I'm going to set one more filter by clicking on filter in the menu, then on start time. And now I'm going to set the start date is relative to today. I'm going to set this to is, and I'm going to set from the drop-down menu here to today. Because in this view, I only want to see focus sessions of today. That's why I have called this, this database view today. And as you can see, all our sessions are still visible because these are, of course, that what we have done today. But I can add one extra one, call it focus session again. And I'm going to add this one with a date from yesterday. Let's put some time again. Also here, another time. And now let's see if this one is also shown in our today view. And as you can see, it's not, because we have filtered it out. I'm going to move the today view to the left, just because I prefer to have this kind of setup. And there's one more view that I want to set up with you, which is a chart view, which you can use if you're on a paid Notion plan, as I am. But if you're on the free plan, this is locked to only one chart in your Notion workspace at the moment. So let's create a new chart where you can already see it pre-filtered with something. I'm gonna rename this view again. I want to call it daily focus hours. And I'm going to give this a bar chart icon to make it more fitting, because we're going to use a bar chart as is already shown here. And what do I want to see on the x-axis is the actual start time. So this is correct, set to today. And I want to sort it from old to new. This is also correct. And I don't want to omit 0 values. So even on days where I have no focus time, I want to see these in my view. On the y-axis, I want to not count. I want to see the focus hours, and I want to set it to sum so that it gives me the total focus time for every day. I don't need to group and I don't need to accumulate these results. So the only thing that's left now is changing the style, where I like to choose blue to keep the data consistent, but you can choose, of course, whatever color you want. And here the height, I like to set this to small, and grid lines, I'll keep it as is. Color by value, I'm not going to use that. And the data labels on top, I like to keep these activated so that I can see the focus time on top right away, which is already all that we need for this chart. And this concludes what we have to do with this database. So first we had the all view, which is a table view where we set up all the properties. Second, we created the today view, where we only see today's focus sessions by filtering them out. And lastly, we created the daily focus hour chart, which shows us the combined focus session and focus hours for each day. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. If so, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. My goal is to reach 1000 subscribers before the end of this year, so your support would be greatly appreciated. And now, on to the next part. For this, we are jumping back into our Focus Time Tracker dashboard page, where I'm going to add a few lines. And I'm going to start by adding another section divider, which I'm going to put as another call out by typing in call, pressing enter, hashtags 2 again to have a heading 2 block, and I'm going to call this one sessions. And to this one, I'm going to add an icon to represent what it's going to show. I'm just going to type in list and put in these 3 lines. And below, I'm going to jump into the next block and I'm going to type in linked, which will open the pop-up menu where you can now choose a linked view of a database. We're going to click on this, which will open this new database view. And you can now choose from the pop-up menu to link to an existing database, where I'm going to choose the Focus Sessions database that we have just created in here. And here I don't have to create any new views now because we have already created everything we need. So now all I have to do is click on this Today view, and it's going to give us the exact view that we have previously created in the database. The only thing that I'm going to change here is I click on the 3 dots next to the title and decide to hide the database title. And I'm going to make all these properties a little bit smaller so that they all fit into this view nicely. And I'm even going as far as locking this view so that I cannot easily edit it anymore, which is now our sessions log right there in our dashboard. For the next part, we are going to create another section in our dashboard page. For this, I'm going again to create a callout block followed by 2 hashtags. And this one we're going to call session timer. And I have already chosen the stopwatch icon for this one. Then I'm going to start a new block just underneath this section heading. And I'm going to type /button to create and select a new button from the drop-down menu. First, I'm going to assign this one the play icon. And I'm going to give the button the title Start Session. And now it's my time to decide what happens when we click this button. So what is our first action? First, I actually want to make it a bit more playful by showing a confirmation. And this confirmation, I'm going to give the message ready to focus with a question mark as well as a relieved emoji. Then what happens when we press the next button, which I'm going to call start, and then there's also a cancel button. So before triggering, I want to have another extra confirmation that asks me, are you ready to focus? And then I press on start, and then the actual button step happens. And what we wanted to do is we add a page to our Focus Sessions database. We add a new Focus session to the Sessions database. We want it to be called Focus Session, so that's what we will assign as a title. And we also want to edit the start time to be set to the time when we trigger this button. So when we press the button, we're going to see a confirmation. We click on start in this confirmation, and it's going to create a new session in our Sessions database with the start time being set to the time that we pressed the button. And that's all we need to do here. We can click on done. And then I'm going to give this button a color by clicking on the 6-dot menu on its left and changing its background color to green. And now that we have already set our start session button, I also want to create an end session button. For this, I'm going to assign the icon of a stopwatch. I'm going to call it end session. And now what happens when we click this button? We do not want to create a new page. Instead, we want to edit the page that was created by the start button. But how do we do this? I click on edit page and I select the database, Focus Sessions database, which is where everything happens in this template. But I don't want to edit all pages. Instead, I want to edit only the page where the end time is empty, because only the last session that we started with the start button can have an empty end time. All the other ones have already previously ended before, so they have an assigned date. But for the one that has just been started with the button, that is still empty. So this is a filter I can use here. And what do we want to do once we have this specific page filtered out? We want to edit the end time property and want to set it to the time triggered. So when we click on the start button, the time for the start time is set to this specific time. And when we click on the end session button, the time of this end time property is set to the time that we pressed the end button, which is exactly what we want to do. Then I click on done and give this another red background color to make it more fitting as a stop session button. And now I want to move this button to the right of the start session button, as well as I'm going to move an extra empty block by dragging and dropping it to the left of the start session button. And now I can just move these buttons around to make them more centered, which looks a bit nicer in my opinion. And now we can make a small test run with the buttons and see if they do what we want them to do. For this, make sure to take a look here at our today's session log, and let's see what happens. I press the start session button. I get the pop-up if I'm ready to focus. Of course I am. I press start. And now you can see a new focus session has appeared, which actually represents the time that it is right now, which is today, 12:05 around noontime. And now, to not wait any longer, I want you to take a look at what happens to this session when we now press on the end session button. It's gonna assign the end time from when the button is triggered, which is 12:06, just a minute or a couple seconds have passed. So obviously the focus time of this session is just 0.02 hours, and now our recommended break time is just 1 minute. But the buttons do exactly what I want them to do. They create a new session with an assigned start time when the button is triggered, and the end session button creates the end time property with the time triggered for the button. Next up, we are going to create our stopwatch widget to actually also have a visual timer of the focus time that we are working. And for this, we have to go into a browser to go to a specific website, which is stopwatch.zrz.li, which I'm going to copy in the description below this video. And if you go to this specific website, you will see it is a website where you can run a stopwatch by just pressing some buttons. And now, after you go to this website, it is important that you copy the link from the address bar that has this little extra suffix behind it, because this will make sure that the link is only working for you. Even when you go in and out of other Notion pages, the time will still keep running on that page. So copy the link, including the suffix, go back into Notion, and we will put the timer up here, where I'm just going to paste the link. And from the small drop-down, I'm going to choose Embed, which is going to embed this website and this timer as a widget on our Notion page. And I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller by using these drag and drop resize elements. And now we have a timer in Notion that we can let run alongside our focus sessions. But it has to be manually triggered. Unfortunately, of course, since this is a separate website, I cannot connect this to these button controls. But whenever we have to start a focus session, all I have to do is press here, and we're good to go. Now the only remaining thing is to also add our visual chart that we have previously created to our dashboard page. For this, I'm adding another new callout as a section divider. I put 2 hashtags followed by a space, and here I will call it focus hours. I'm going to change the icon to a bar chart, which is what this part is going to include. And here in the next block, I will type in again linked and then select link view of database. Again, I'm going to choose our focus sessions database. And here I'm going to choose our daily focus hours that we have already created. Click on it. And now you can see the chart that we've previously created. So you will always be able to see a small visual indicator of how productive you have been today and yesterday, which is a great tool to gamify and maybe challenge yourself to maybe be a little bit more productive, a little more focused than yesterday, which I found really helpful. And alongside the button controls, make this template really fun to use. Lastly, I'm just going to show you what I do. I try to clean up my dashboard pages. This looks very nice now, same as the chart, which I'm also going to lock to not accidentally edit it anymore. I also have already locked this view, and I like to put one divider between the content of my database, of my dashboard page, and the below section that includes the database. So basically, our focus time tracker is now complete. So I can also go into the database and make sure to lock it by going to the three-dot menu in the top right to not make any accidental changes. And I can also keep this page that I've now created in the private pages. You can obviously just move this page around in your workspace and put it wherever you want. And that's it for this tutorial. Check the description below this video to get a free copy of this template. Don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to my channel for more Notion templates and tutorials. Also, let me know in the comments below what kind of template you would like me to build next. I read and reply to all comments, and I will try my best to fulfill any template wishes and requests. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to my free newsletter and to stay up to date with the latest Notion features and any changes that I make to this template.